الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهداه إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Dear brothers and sisters, this is a new lesson where we're going to study inshaAllah ta'ala the Sunni Creed. And I chose for you the Islamic Creed, or the great Islamic Creed by Imam Muhammad al-Makki Ibn Azuz al-Burji. This great scholar that was a famous scholar in the last century. He was from Tunisia and originally from a place now in Algeria. But in that era, all those lands were are part of the Ottoman Empire, where the Islamic State was one big state. There were other states, but that was the main state, where the capital was in Istanbul, and they had one leader who was the Ottoman Sultan or Ottoman Muslim Caliph. But the era that Imam Muhammad al-Makki ibn Azuz was in the last days of this Ottoman Empire, where this empire suffered from a lot of problems and was in its last days. And Sheikh Muhammad al-Makki ibn Azuz, actually, in his days, France took place and occupied all North Africa, Algeria, Tunisia before Algeria, then Tunisia, then Morocco. Morocco was the last state that was invaded by France. And so therefore, he tried his best to struggle against France, but in the end he decided to go to the Islamic capital, Istanbul. Maybe he would spread his knowledge there, he would work for Islam. So therefore, he went to Istanbul, but he discovered that there was a big change, where there was a party that took place there and started calling for reform, democracy, and stuff like that. Yeah, Sheikh, because he was against lots of old fashions and old ways of thinking. He supported in the beginning this movement, but he discovered that this movement was influenced by the European mentality. And that's the European mentality in that century was against religion and against all things that are unseen. So therefore, he decided to write a book for the new generation. The new generation that don't know their creed properly. And therefore, they focus, as it is until today, they focus on all types of science, but they don't pay attention to their religion. And therefore, because he used to teach in an academy in Istanbul, I'm going to mention his life and how he worked and what did he do, what are his main books and all these types of things. I'm going to mention that, inshallah, after a little bit. So I said that because of that, he decided to write this book, and he wrote it in Arabic and translated it to Turkish. And actually, he used to know Turkish because he was in, because the official language in the Ottoman Empire was Turkish. So therefore, this is his idea. So he decided that he has to write a creed, an Islamic creed, for the new generation. So he wrote this. It's a small book, just like this, but it has some commentaries on it. So he wrote this small book, where he decided, he mentioned the attributes of Allah Almighty in the way that would be understood by the new generation. And he spoke about Allah's, what does he do, what are his rulings, and all that is by a wisdom. He didn't create things just randomly. And he spoke about angels and jinn, and what's the work of angels, what is the work of jinn, and what does faith mean, belief, and what are the pillars of faith, and what does believing in destiny mean. And he proved that mankind has a willing, and he is going to be judged according to that, to his willing, and what he practices according to that willing. And then he spoke about the rational thinking, and he said that rational thinking has to be following the religion, because any creature does not know any attributes of his creator unless he gives them some information about that. So rational thinking cannot give you the attributes of the creator. And therefore, all has to do with unseen things, no way for the rational thinking to get the reality about that. Actually, after that, he insists on the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah, and that all what is in the Quran and Sunnah, it doesn't conflict with rational thinkings. And this idea, this main thing, which is knowing what is the work of the rational thinking, what is the work of the mind, the sense, and what does it have to do. And he says that this is one of the two main things that either lead you to be always happy or to be always miserable and sad, which is what is the work of the rational thinking. Pay attention to this because this is very important in this book. The second one is believing that God's power and his willing, believing in God's power and willing, and that he is Almighty. He can make and do whatever he wants, and what he wants can sometimes be against the rules of the world. And that would be part of the bounty of Allah Almighty. And he corrects the wrong commentary on the verse that says, فَلَن تَجِدَ لِسُنَّةِ اللَّهِ تَبْدِيلًا, and you won't find any change on God's way of ruling the world. And here it speaks about the way he gains victory on his enemies, and he supports his prophets and their followers. So the sunnah here means the path of the prophets, not the way of the rules of the world, the physical rules of the world, that means. And therefore, he insists that you have to take care of these two things, which is Firstly, what is the work or the job of the sense, the mind? Number two, that all this world is under the authority and the power of Allah, and He can change what He wants when He wants. Okay, so therefore, these are the two wings of the Muslim that he would escape from any trials. This is very important. He insists on that. And then he wrote a chapter on what happened. A chapter that concerns heavens and earths. And he mentions what are the heavens, what are the earths, and stuff like that. Things, and how come the earth is a ball, and on the same time it's easy to walk on, and it's many people nowadays speak about this again. Okay. So therefore, the earth is flat, and on the same time, it's like a ball. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world. And then he wrote a chapter about prophets and messengers, and all what has to do with that, and their miracles and stuff like that. And he spoke after that about the Holy Quran and the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that He is responsible subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the Holy Quran from any corruption and change. After that, he spoke about the other books, holy books, that passed away and existed, and all what has to do with that. And then he spoke about how the importance of the Sunnah, the tradition, people call it tradition, and that it has the same power in that has to be implemented like the Holy Quran, and it's preserved as the Quran was preserved. You can't add or omit anything from it. After that, he answered the question, why do the scholars differ between each other, although we have one Sharia? And he spoke about that, and he warned from interpreting the Quran only by your mind without going back to Quran and Sunnah, because that destroys the meaning of the Quran. And then he spoke about Darwin's theory, and that his theory is totally against the Quran and all of the sacred scriptures. After that, he spoke about a main rule of faith and being sure about your faith, which means you don't have any doubts in your faith, and that's all what has to do with the willing and power of God Almighty. All has to do with that. So therefore, he spoke about prophets' miracles, and he claimed and he refuted the ones that claim that it has to be according to the physical rules, or else we don't accept it. So he spoke about these things, which we're going to detail that inshallah in its time. And he spoke about the ways of Allah Almighty's power, and that He is the one who creates the reasons and what happens from the reasons, what is reasonable and what happens after that. Then he mentioned the innovation that have to do with our creed, and that we're not allowed to claim that Allah Almighty, we're not allowed to create names and attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because all that has to be taught in the Quran and the Sunnah. And he spoke about the miracles that happen to righteous people, which are called in Islam karamat, and that it's a branch of the miracles of prophets, peace be upon them. And then after that, in the last chapter, he mentioned what's going to happen in the hereafter, starting by death, and then what's going to happen in the graves, and what's going to happen in the hereafter until people of paradise enter paradise, and people of hell would go to hell. He didn't speak about the signs of the hereafter, and he said, well, leave that to the teachers. The teachers will take care of that. But he mentioned the dome of the king that has two horns. Who is the king that has two horns? He spoke about that, and he spoke about Gog and Magog and these stuff, and he mentioned its place exactly, and he refuted the ones that denied that. And then he spoke about the resurrection and intercession of the Prophet ﷺ, and the judgments and the weights, all these things that are going to happen in the hereafter. And then he completed his book by answering the last question: is, does invocation have any benefits, or it doesn't have any benefits, and things that have to do with that. This is, in few words, the what this beautiful creed contains. And that, why did I choose this to teach it? I chose this book to teach it because it speaks about the creed from a Maliki Athari scholar from North Africa, and or the Western Islamic states, and I chose it because he refutes many ideas, false ideas that still exist until today. So we might need that today to refute the seculars and people who are influenced by these guys. Okay? So this is very important. So who is Sheikh Muhammad al-Makki Ibn Azuz rahimahullah tabaraka wa ta'ala? Muhammad al-Makki Ibn Azuz rahimahullah was one of the great scholars that were in the last century. He was a muhaddith, he was a commentator on the Quran, he was a reciter of the Quran, he was a jurist, he knew Islamic rules of inheritance. He used to know astronomy too. He was a judge, he was a mufti, he was a literature, and he traveled a lot. He's a traveler. And he is called Muhammad al-Makki ibn Mustafa ibn Azuz al-Burji al-Nafti. Al-Burji al-Nafti, he was born in 15th Ramadan, 1270 Hijri, in a city called Nafta in South Tunisia. Now it's in South Tunisia. And he grew up in a family of knowledge. So his father, who was a righteous person, he took care of him a lot. And he started studying in their zawiyah. They had a zawiyah. A zawiyah here means a Sufi place of worshiping God. It's actually a masjid, but they call it zawiyah because it's a masjid of a specific group, Sufi group. So therefore, they had a Sufi group, and their Sufi group had several zawaya, and these zawaya used to teach people. And it was called, now it's called Zawiyat Sidi Mustafa. Maybe because his father is called Mustafa, so Sidi Mustafa. So he memorized the Holy Quran there, when he was 11 years old, he completed memorizing the Holy Quran. And then he took care of memorizing all of the poems that have to do with knowledge in that era. After that, these two cities, Nafta and Tozar, southern Tunisia, were full of schools of knowledge, were full of scholars that teach, and they had many scholars came from that place. So he studied Al-Ajrumiyya, which is grammar. He studied fiqh by Ibn Ashir, and he studied, this is in the beginning, by a sheikh called Qasim al-Khayrani. This is what he studied with Sheikh Qasim al-Khayrani. And he studied the beginning of inheritance rules, like by al-Rahbiyya, al-Durr al-Bayda. And he studied astronomy by a book of Introduction to Astronomy on his cousin, Muhammad ibn Abdul Rahman al-Tawzari. And he studied Alfiyat ibn Malik, which is in grammar, advanced grammar, and the book of Khalil in jurisprudence, Maliki jurisprudence, by Sheikh Tawzari ibn Abi Qasim al-Zaydi al-Nafti. And he studied Sunan Tirmidhi by his cousin, or his uncle, Muhammad al-Madani ibn Azuz. You can see that there were several scholars, and many of them were from his family. And after that, he went from Tunisia, after he took his primary studying, he went now to the main university that was in Tunisia, which is the Zaytuna University. And that was when he was 22 years old in 1292, before I was born by 100 years, exactly 100 years. So he went to this university and he studied Quran by the 7 narrations of Quran on Sheikh Muhammad Bashir Tuati, and he studied on Sheikh Umar bin Sheikh, advanced Usul al-Fiqh by Jam' al-Jawami' of Imam al-Subki, and he studied Muwatta Imam Malik and other books of all types of literature and stuff like that. He had a lot of teachers in Jami' al-Zaytuna, which is a great school and a great university of North Africa. And they used to be very strict in teaching, and they don't give their their permission for the students to start teaching until they pass a very hard exam. After that, he started having good posts. So he became a mufti of Nafta, and when he was 27 years old, and then he became the judge of Nafta. Okay? So he went after that to Algeria, and he met Sheikh Muhammad bin Abi al-Qasim, who was the leader of Zawiyat al-Hamil, which is called Zawiyat al-Hamil. And he met a great mufti of the Malikis in Algeria, Sheikh Ali al-Khaffaf, and then he decided to travel to Egypt and Hijaz and Syria and meet all scholars there. Of course, all this was one land under the authority of the Ottoman Empire. After that, his family went from Nafta to Tunisia, which is the city, the main city of Tunisia, Tunis. And he started teaching in Tunisia, in the capital of Tunisia. Yeah. So he started teaching in Zaytuna University, the book of Khalil and Sahih Bukhari and lots of advanced books actually. So, and one of his great students is the Shaykh al-Azhar. He was, after that, he became Shaykh al-Azhar, Sheikh Muhammad al-Khadr al-Hussein, very famous scholar. Muhammad al-Khadr al-Hussein, who was one of the Azhar leaders, one of the Azhar leaders in Egypt. And amongst them was Sheikh Abdul Aziz Thalibi, the famous Tunisian leader. A famous Tunisian leader. Sheikh Muhammad al-Makki ibn Azuz was against France's occupation in North Africa. So therefore, he was against France in Tunisia and Algeria as well. But when things went so hard for him, he decided to go to Istanbul, and he was respected by the Sultan Abdul Hamid, rahimahullah. And he took care of studying Turkish until he became strong in Turkish. So therefore, they decided to give him a post in university there, which is the great university of Istanbul, which is called Dar al-Khair, and later on it was called Dar al-Funun. And after Mufti of Istanbul, and maybe he was Sheikh al-Islam, I think, he was called Sheikh Ismail Hiqqi, who was a professor of teaching Islamic Quranic studies. He took his post. So he took his post and he started teaching Quranic studies, not Quran, Quranic studies and Hadith studies. And therefore, after that, the Ottoman Empire created another university, which is called Madrasatul Wa'idin, and he became a teacher there, and he started giving lectures in Arabic and in Turkish. Sheikh Muhammad Makki ibn Azuz wrote lots of books, and he was influenced by the Salafi movements, although he started as a Sufi from a Sufi school. And in the beginning of his life, he wrote a book defending Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani. And it's published. It was published in Istanbul, I think. So Sheikh, after that, when he started traveling, he met a lot of reformers and scholars in the Islamic land. So he started having another view about the Salafi movement, and especially the works of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah. So therefore, he adopted those opinions, and he became so active in defending Sunnah. So therefore, he left lots of interesting books, and he had strong relationship with Sheikh with Sheikh Abdul Hayy al-Kettani rahimahullah. And Sheikh Abdul Hayy wrote his biography in his book, famous book, Fihrist Faris, and that biography is the most important biography that was written about Sheikh Muhammad al-Makki ibn Azuz, and he praised his work because Sheikh Muhammad al-Makki ibn Azuz, he has some books about creed, Islamic creed. He has some books about qira'ats, recitations of the Quran. He has books about hadith. He has books about some things that the Malikis used to do, and he finds that it's not the Sunnah, which is instead of putting your hand over each other, you just leave it like this. So he wrote a very interesting book about that. And he wrote lots of actually interesting books which need to be published again, actually, in a beautiful publish. Okay? So, yeah. And he defended the Salafi point of view about lots of things, especially in that era that Many people used to attack the Salafi movements. So he works on that. Okay? He wrote a book about defending Sheikh Ibn Taymiyyah and his student Ibn Qayyim. And yeah, so he has lots of interesting works, which are nearly 70 books. He wrote nearly 70 books. And therefore, Sheikh Abdul Hayy Kettani says that when he passed away, and he says, and I had long messages between me and him. And he says that I continued having good relationship with him, and the messages can be in a big book, in a book, because letter and its answer, it would be a book. And every time when I remember, he says, every time when I remember that he passed away, I feel that the world is dark. I feel that the world is dark. He used to love him, and he had good relationship with him, and he used to agree with him in a lot of opinions. Yeah. So actually, this is Sheikh Muhammad al-Makki ibn Azuz, and I can say that in the end of his life, he passed away in Istanbul. Okay. He passed away in Istanbul in the 2nd of Safar, 1333, and he was 64 years old when he passed away. 64 years old, and he was buried in the minister. So he was buried in the cemetery of Yahya Effendi in Istanbul, rahimahullah, and lots of scholars wrote about him and praised him and spoke very good about him. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put mercy upon him, rahimahullah, wa ghafarallahu lahu wa tajawaz an. Inna waliyu dhalika wal qadiru alayh. So this is what we can say about this Sheikh, this Imam, and actually this book, he has what is called Aqidah Kubra, the great or the big creed, and he wrote another one which is summarized from it called Aqidah Sughra. It seems that he wanted to do as people used to study in that era, Aqidah Kubra of Sanusi and Aqidah Sughra of Sanusi. So he made another Aqidah Kubra and another Aqidah Sughra. And I saw two commentaries on this Aqidah. The first one is by Sheikh Majd Makki. Majd Makki is a Syrian scholar from Aleppo, and he studied in Mecca and several places, and then he settled in Qatar now. And he is one of the students of my grandfather, rahimahullah. So his commentary on the book is very interesting and very beautiful. Although he sometimes comments in an Ash'ari way, in a way or another, because he's a bit Ash'ari, yes. Another commentary was by an Algerian scholar called Boughazala, and his commentary is strong and good, and he works on the book in a good way. And one of the great Tunisian scholars nowadays, Sheikh Mukhtar al-Jbali, Hafidhahullah wa baraka fi, told me that he's working on the book, and he has some scriptures about the book, which are going to help him give the best edition of the book, inshallah. And I'm waiting for that edition. Maybe it'll be the best edition. But look, what I discovered is that there is a difference between the copy of Sheikh Majd Makki and the copy of Sheikh Boughazala, the Algerian scholar. And even the classification is different. I don't know exactly, although the classification of Sheikh Boughazala stands on a scripture written by a Moroccan way of writing. Yeah, that Moroccan way of writing was famous in all North Africa, Andalusia, and Africa. So all Western Africa, they used to write with this Moroccan scripture. And even the Masahif, until now in Morocco and in Tunisia and in Mauritania in Africa, it's still written in the Moroccan scriptures. Okay, so this is the idea of the book, and these are the commentaries on the book. So I suggest that the one that wants to benefit from the book, he can read these two commentaries. The commentary of Majd Makki is beautiful because he refers to lots of other scholars and books. The commentary of Boughazala is interesting because he takes or derives a lot from the books of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim and others, actually. But he focuses on Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn Qayyim. So this is the idea. So nowadays, several scholars started teaching this creed, but it took a lot of time to make it known. I don't know why. Maybe because there are other books well known, so it didn't spread as the others. May Allah put mercy on Imam Muhammad al-Makki ibn Azuz and put mercy on all of our scholars. Rahimahumullah. And now I'll give you the translation of... I don't know any translation, any English translation of this book. Maybe there is a translation. But for me, I don't know any translation. So therefore, let us see. He says, I'm only going to read the English translation without reading the Arabic text. You can go back to the Arabic text because if I translate the Arabic text as well and read it, it'll take a lot of time. He says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wa alihi wa sallam. The main idea of this book, when Allah Almighty gave bounty on the Ottoman land by getting rid of the dictatorship and abusing knowledge, and the whole ummah was happy for that, and they gathered with each other to improve themselves and raise up, and every one of them helped his brother to take off ignorance from their minds and get out of being astray, and taking off being lazy. So therefore, no people would gain without uniting with each other and spreading all what they have, all knowledge that they have, and listening to the people who advise them, give them good advices, and purify their hearts from envy and stuff like that. And now, all these teachings gain victory, and this is the first dawn that would start And everyone who has good knowledge and knows good things, he started showing it for people and teaching it so that everybody would benefit from it. And therefore, the first thing that people start studying in their primary schools is how to serve the state and the religion, and what he has to do and what he has to not do. And therefore, the main thing that they gave the students to study are the physical studies that people needed so that they can improve building their country, building, making machines, creating a lot of things. And there's no conflicts between people. He says, there's no conflict between studying physical studies and stuff like that and knowing and studying your religion, to whom complete this and this. But because many people don't know the work of the mind, and how to deal with the text, they have this problem. And they might lose their faith without feeling. So I wanted by this book to take care of Muslims' creed, to give it to the students by the two great tongues, the two great languages, Arabic language, which is the language of religion, and the Turkish language, which is the language of the state. Taking notice that in both of them, or in most of this book, it answers the question of lots of doubts that have to do with the Islamic creed, and they might affect the creed. So that they don't lose one of these two benefits, which is the virtues of understanding what they're working on, and the virtues of taking care of their creed, their Islamic creed, that is going to be helpful in this life and in the hereafter. I wrote this book, that means. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَن يَبْتَغِي غَيْرَ الْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا فَلَن يُقْبَلَ مِنْهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. And anyone who chooses another religion except Islam, it won't be accepted from him, and he will be in the hereafter amongst the losers. And salutes on the prophets and praises to Allah, the Lord of all creatures. Muhammad al-Makki Ibn Azuz, rahimahullah. So you can understand from this introduction, which doesn't exist in the copy of Bu Ghazala, the Algerian, that why did he write this book? He wrote it to conserve and protect the belief of the new generation. So sorry to tell you that what is he speaking about? The dictatorship. He's speaking about Sultan Abd Hamid, rahimahullah. And the coup that happened against Sultan Abd Hamid wasn't because he was a dictatorship. So sorry to say this. But it was because Sultan Abd Hamid, rahimahullah, was the last independent sultan in the Ottoman Empire. And he stood firm against the Zionist work to invade Palestine, because the Zionist movement came to him and told him that we would love to serve you and pay all the Ottoman Empire's debts and work hard for you, but just give the Jews Palestine. He kicked them out and he said, I would never give you a part of my land. That's our ancestors share blood on it. You might take it after my death, but for me, I would never give you a land like that. So Sheikh uh, Sultan Abdul Hamid, when he did this, they worked hard to take him off and imprison him in his palace and speak very bad about him and show him as a dictatorship. Where actually, and so sorry that many scholars in that era believed that he was a dictatorship. And amongst these was Sheikh Muhammad Makki ibn Azuz. But Sheikh Muhammad Makki ibn Azuz noticed that this movement was like a secular movement or something like that, and therefore he felt that he has to do something to protect the youth's creed, the youth's belief, and that's why he works on this. Wallahu musta'an wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. But what happened later on is that the whole empire was destroyed, and the seculars took place by their leader Mustafa Kemal, who called himself Ataturk, which means the leader of the Turks, and he made Turkey so far from Islam, and he stopped anything that has to do with Islam. He fought anything that has to do with Islam, even Arabic language in adhan. Subhanallah. So, rahmatullahi alayhi, ala Sheikh Muhammad Makki ibn Azuz, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put mercy upon his soul and the soul of all scholars, all of our scholars. Thank you very much for being patient with me. And later on, inshallah, we'll speak about this, the other things of this book. Alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu wa jazakumullah khairan.